Hey, everybody.
I didn't know you were wearing the shades there, Andrew. I should have had my shades or sunnies ready.
My sunnies are on.
The sunnies are on. It's a bit grey here in Sydney, so we've had a lot of rain. So what's it like in LA?
It's warm but comfortable, like 65, I think it is today.
Ooh,
Fahrenheit.
we're coming into autumn. Oh, I can see someone's come in, Andrew, already. Dave from Liverpool.
Nice.
Fantastic.
Glad to see you here, Dave. Dave from Liverpool in the UK.
Yep.
So yeah, let me.
Good to have you in, Dave.
So yeah, let me remind everybody. Welcome. Where are you watching from? Don't be shy. Let us know.
I know. I've got to, I've got to get a bit of international fix and see where people are coming from. So, Andrew, what have you been doing creative-wise? Have you been creative or in a little bit of a rut? Or
no, things have been good. It's just been busy with clients too. So, tutoring and photo editing and things kind of keep bubbling up. And the minute I get done with one project, someone else contacts me. So I'm thankful for that. It's good.
It's always good when you have a small business and you're a sole trader. And
yeah,
we've got Doug from
Douglas.
Melbourne.
Morning, y'all.
Yeah, morning,
good to see you, Doug. We have Hannah from Belgrade. Good to see you, Hannah.
Yeah. No, I've been setting up Pinterest.
Oh yeah, nice. I say it's really good for SEO too. Like if you start posting there, then people can find you and then therefore find your other websites as well.
Yep. So I'm learning something new, which is good. Keeps the brain cells ticking along.
Sure. Nice.
And doing a little bit of creative work.
I'm pretty much open to a lot of the different networks except for TikTok. The idea of seeing people doing those silly dancing all the time, I mean, I guess there's some good content there, but it's just, I don't know, it seems a bit of an annoying platform to me.
Oh, I have to admit, I watch a little TikTok for some fun.
TikTok.
TikTok, yeah. Yeah. So, there's some funny things on there.
Maybe I should join it, Maybe I can get traffic back to this show too with it.
I just look at it for a brain break, some of the funny stuff.
Sure.
And, you just look at it and you think, oh, this is not going to end well.
Yeah.
So Doug, Dave and Hannah, what have you been up to? Anything exciting that you'd like to share with the world?
And I also wanted to remind everybody who might be watching from the Facebook groups to give StreamYard permission to show your name and profile pics. So I'll be able to credit you when you comment or ask questions. That's the link under the live, StreamYard.com/Facebook. Just give that a click. And once again, welcome everybody. Let us know where you're watching from.
Yeah, and encourage questions and comments too.
Yeah,
Sorry there, Andrew, I cut you off.
No, I was just going to add to what you said earlier too, like Douglas and Hannah, let us know what you might be working on too, and then we'll jump in with our display of our work and talk about that.
Yeah, mine's a little bit different, isn't it, Andrew? I'm certainly different to what I've been doing past, and right. Doing that.
You said that about my one piece too. That was different for me. The one with the red that we'll see today. So
I think it's good to mix up different stuff. Well, for me, it's good to mix up styles and colors. For me, it just, it challenges your thinking, particularly in the color. Oh, yep.
I guess he's talking about the group, the Photoshop and Lightroom group. Popped a few images on. Good.
Oh, hope you're doing okay there, Hannah.
She says still keeping a low profile of 2 months of Corona. Oh, sorry to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, it hits people different ways, doesn't it? So.
Yeah, I took a quick bus to meet a client today in had my mask on. There was one guy yelling at someone for not wearing a mask, but I wasn't going to get involved in that.
No, it's the way of the world today, unfortunately, I think. We were just talking about it before, Andrew, that for me, probably close on 3 years, it's been the most creative that I've ever been.
Nice.
Because I've had time to think and, go out into that yonder and start thinking about work. It is.
And Douglas says he's working on another piece for his social statement series.
Oh, interesting. Work in progress, yeah. Excellent. Dave, you're right there. We'll get Dave.
Yeah, Dave. Come on, Dave. But yeah, I was going to say that the pandemic, I think, made me even more introverted than I was before. So, this year I'm building up some images, but last year I think I put out more images last year than I did in previous years combined. So hopefully this year will be just as prolific. Yeah. So speaking of work, shall we share your work? And I can ask questions. Yeah. People who are watching can ask questions. You can talk about it. So
I'd encourage.
Can you add it to the stream, or do you want me to add it to the stream?
Can you add it in there, Andrew? Then. Go. So
looks good.
Yeah, some of you may recognise the Sydney Opera House sales. I'm from Sydney, Australia. Just finishing some images from a trip to Scotland, Dave. How fantastic.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'd love to. I've been to Scotland, but I'd like to go back as a photographer. Before I was a tourist, I think there's a little bit of a difference, where you can go. But this one is something that I created when we were speaking about it in a 4.5-month lockdown. We were in really hard lockdown. And so where I lived, we could only travel no more than 5 kilometres. It was a time where your world just evolved around a 5K radius. So this one is something that all of the elements are mine except for the chair and the bottle. I don't mind if I have a story in my mind where I get my resources from, because it's about I've got a story to tell. Absolutely. So for me, it was very much about the Sydney Opera House being closed. It was just probably a bit of inspiration, Andrew, from Planet of the Apes type sort of look. And so I started off with the foreground, which is mine. Then I put the sails of the opera house in, and then the story built from there. So it was more of an organic. So my thinking was very much, I'll put the sails in, and then I'm going to give it this sign that says it's closed, which technically it had been closed. And then I wanted to turn it into a night image. So it's probably a lot darker for me normally in my bright colours. But as the story just built, I started to look at it and, whack in the crows, as the saying goes, put them in. So it gives that sense they're hanging around. And then the chair and the bottle very much represents people, because people go to the opera house for different things, concerts, and so it's deserted. So this person is just sitting there feeling so lost and not being able to be part of a group. And so it was an organic type of image for me. And obviously with the moon, that represents that night feel. And then I did light. One of the things there, Andrew, that I do, and I don't know whether you do and others, is I experiment with different techniques to get different looks. And so I started the brushwork coming from the moon, I put in some mist particles to give it that sort of foggy look. Did
you do like a color grading over the whole image?
Yeah, the color grading what I'll do is I put all my elements in, I'll do a little trick that sort of tones in the colors, and then I used a LUT, a color lookup table. Yep. And the one I used was Foggy Night. And so that really gave the tones. And then I do a bit more color grading.
Nice.
Right. And for some people will look at it and go, the chair may not be sitting right. For me, it's about telling a story. I don't have to have photorealism.
Sure.
And that's this one here.
Great.
Anyone nice. Got some comments, questions, or, what did you see in it? Because this is where it'd be great to get some interaction, wouldn't it, Andrew?
Yeah, and I like the, like I said, the kind of a bit of the color grade that you did above it too, which adds to the mood.
Yep. And for this one, I put in, and I was just thinking either grain or noise. Sometimes I'll put noise and grain in to get that sort of, grainy, vintagey look.
Yeah, and I want to say that Hannah made a comment about thanks for the beautiful textures.
Thank you, Hannah. Yes. Textures is my thing. You'll see I think I've used a couple. Oh, yes, I have used a couple of textures. Then the next one that I've got is certainly different for me, Andrew. Very dark, and it's probably not showing up on the screen, the richness of the colours, but
zoom in a
bit. The story behind this came from with the recent events that is happening in Ukraine. And I had this photo of an abandoned building. And I've had this chair sitting in my stock library for ages and never did anything. It's digital art, so it's a mixed medium. So my photos, digital art, and some other techniques in there.
Has a nice painterly feel too.
Yes, that's what I tend to do with some of my images. So for this one, I wanted to show the darkness and the light with the hope and the abandoned. So for this story, it's like, for me, I put myself living in my home and then have to leave it abandoned. So this is probably a deep story in my storytelling. And then I started to play with elements. So I put the birds there. They got no significance, but I just did a little bit of a balance, what I call like a triangle composition balance for me. The chair and then the bird and then the bird. It gives a triangular shape for the balance.
I like the feeling that you're inside and kind of like with the moon at the top, you're kind of outside. So it's an inside-outside play going on.
Yeah, and that was where I felt before I put the moon in, I feel there's negative space there. What can I put in there? And so that's why I just thought I'd put that moon of just giving a yin yang type feeling to it. And the stairs is very much that. Probably I'm trying to think of the word, but it's got significance that they're climbing the stairs to try and get up and reach and get out. So it's probably a very dark image for me. But what the lessons I learnt from it was how to color grade. And so I did textures, I did a number of techniques that I use in color grading to get that tone. Nice. And I also use presets, profiles, to give me that base coloring. And then I build the depth of my color there.
Nice. Yeah, it's nice.
This is my latest one. And again, it's just, for me, sometimes the stories, I don't know about you, Andrew, but stories come in to create of what's happening around the world or happening in my life or whatever. And so, again, this was inspired by the children having to leave Ukraine. And it's just how I am thinking at the moment and looking at some images. And for me, the metaphor to this is the suitcase. It's a children's suitcase with the teddy bear. And then the books, because, for me, if you said to a child, pack, we have to leave quickly, what would a child pack? And it would be totally different, I think, to what we would pack as an adult. And so I wanted to reflect that child, having to leave their bed very quickly. And that open window is another metaphor of just there's light and trying to get out. This one tested me as far as my color grading, because I really wanted what I call, and if anyone can help me, the color palette that I find is very European. When I've gone overseas and I've looked in the museums and you see the colors, it's a very different color palette, very muted, and depth of color, and that's what I worked on. And
what seems I was going to say,
sorry.
it seems with a few of these images today, you're balancing blues and browns together nicely.
Yeah. So combination of the blues. There's one I did a texture layer, and it's a green, but I'm trying to put a label on the green, and it gives it that blue green coming through.
Like a teal?
And yeah, like a teal, a very deep teal, that I will use that as a color grading, not so much for the texture, but for the color grading.
Nice.
And so with this, I also played with light. I put the crack on the wall as a brush. So I've made my own brushes, and that's where I wanted to put that fracture of that crack.
And I like the light coming in and hitting the wall and the bed. Now, with an image like this, do you also add like a dodge and burn layer and go in and dodge and burn the different areas, or?
Yeah, I use some different techniques for my light. So the light coming in on the bed was done with the lasso tool, selected an area, and then I put that into a levels adjustment layer, and then I tweak it to get the light, because I find that gets a softer light.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the, thank you, Dave, I was just trying to find the wording. Thank you. I can sleep at night now. Now I'm very Eastern European. That's exactly what I was after. And I did a little bit of dodging on the suitcase to give it that little bit of light, but then I also did some burn to tone it down, because I didn't want to alter it.
Sure.
And if you look at it, it's a composite. So I added the curtain, I added the bird, I added the suitcase and the bear and the books. But the base image is one image, so I haven't built the scene.
Sure.
So then the next one is a little bit different in the color palette. You can see very strong textures in this, and it was inspired by, in Sydney we've had some major, and even in Australia on the East Coast, major flooding. And thousands of people have just lost homes, everything. And so, again, this is another metaphor that I put the tree as a person or a family being ripped out from their surroundings. Sure. And so that's why I did the tree with the little bit of dirt. Now, that was a learning curve, Andrew. I struggled on, how am I going to do this? That's what I like about challenging yourself, is thinking of something and then thinking, well, how am I going to do that in Photoshop? Probably could be better, but, hey, that's how it is. That's how you learn. So I put the shadow in the foreground, and again, I've got a brush made out of tree branches, and I'll use that as roots. And, this is a tree taken somewhere in my travels, but the color tone's totally different. But again, the metaphor for this was it's just been ripped out, and that's why I did the very strong muted colors. And normally, like on the top right and left, I don't have as strong a vignette, but I really wanted the viewer to be directed in and put their own story into it.
Yeah, it's nice. I really like the textures and the sky, especially very painterly. And then you got the nice composition when the rain coming down.
Yeah, that was a brush.
There's a bit different color palette for this one than the others too. Yeah.
Yeah, this one, and that's why I like experimenting with different colors. I'll use LUTs. I'll use a solid color fill. I'll use profiles. I'll use presets. I will even use Topaz Studio in Impressionism, and sometimes that gets a painterly look. And then I put lots of textures. I think this image had 5 what I call fine art textures. So Hannah, that's my 5 art textures fine art textures have gone into this to get that depth of colour. And that's what I like. I don't go for, the big colour shift. I'll go subtle, but that's my style. So
Nice.
I'd be interested in seeing some comments there, Andrew. Any questions or any thoughts? And this work is for me.
Don't be shy now, everybody. Let us know.
Yeah.
Questions, comments.
I can put that down. Eastern European, Dave. I'm going to do a little bit of research up on that.
Eastern European painting or something.
If anyone can, someone gave me another, and my pronunciation, Chorizio, something like that. It's a form of a different period of art.
Chiaroscuro.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes.
Yeah.
And I did my research and I went, I haven't heard of that one. So there's my 4 images and something totally different from my whimsical work.
Yeah, it's very nice. Very nice.
It's quiet there, Andrew.
Yeah, right. Any quiets? Any comments, questions?
Yes. Yeah.
Any quiets? Lots of quiets.
Yeah, lots of quiets.
There we go. Hannah says, I did a first composite with your textures and I really love it. We'll keep on experimenting. Excellent.
Great. Yep. My Sandra D imagery website with lots of textures.
And I'll talk about that later on with the discount.
Yeah. So it's quite that.
Yeah, I guess I'll jump into my work and then okay. So from this series of 4, it's not really a series, but 4 that I've created recently. Now this one was, a lot of my work is based on the kind of themes of dreams. So, I like the idea of like a doorway going into another reality. So I found like some of these old images of old kind of sculptures or reliefs in part of buildings, I think in a European relief. And I also found this beautiful kind of walkway. And then once again, I mixed it with that, the motif of the, ocean, the deep ocean, which I think for me is a good metaphor for like meditation. So it was the idea of kind of going from one, I guess, state of consciousness to a deeper kind of dream, opening into another world. So I combined like the relief image with another image altogether that was kind of like this walkway. I think it was like a Spanish villa type of walkway. And I liked playing with the main image was very bright, and I liked making the door in the background kind of darker and creating contrast that way. And then adding a bit of that like color grading. And here you see a bit in the middle, a brown and a blue kind of theme. And then just kind of going back with layer mask and letting the accents of the color come through in certain areas. Yeah.
What I love, Andrew, is your layers. And when I say layers, there's so many depth of layers when you look around your images. So that to me, you come to that, that laneway, hallway, but then your eyes starting to look around, and then it's like, there's brick pavers. There's fish. So it's like it's unrevealing itself as you look around.
Right, and I think that's the challenge for me too is, big challenge is adding a lot of elements, but then still trying to keep it simple and focus. Yep. So if it gets too busy and it's taking your eye everywhere, then it's not working. So in something like this, where there's that kind of busyness of the relief of the different people, I liked having that very center focused walkway to kind of keep your eye tuned into the middle area. But that can be a challenge. I mean, that used to be a bigger challenge in the past for me. I think in time, I'm starting to be able to, hone in on really what I want a bit more.
It's about developing your style and what works for you, I think.
Yeah, and being aware of like what didn't work in the past. So if something became too busy, recognizing where you might be going into that same kind of zone again. So if if it's getting too busy, I'm like, okay, let's bring it back. So
I'm intrigued about your drawers that you can see through. Do you just work on your opacity, dropping your opacity to get that see through?
well, I think originally I had the deep ocean image, and then I added the doors, and I think I just with the doors I changed the different layer blending modes.
Okay.
So I
Yep.
cycled through until I found one that kind of worked with it, and I knew I wanted the middle area to be very different. So I kind of worked on the background, the doors first, and then had the idea that I would cut out like the middle and add this relief with the thing. So I kind of was working like it felt like I was working on two different images in the same image, and I kind of juxtaposed them together. And then I did add some like dodging and burning to kind of make sure that the entranceway to the step over into the other world, I guess you could say, was a bit darker and not too bright because I wanted that your eye to go directly to where the light is.
It reminds me very much of Atlantis, that
Yeah.
world underneath.
Yeah. And,
Beautifully done.
oh, thank you. Thank you. And let's see, I'll go to another one. So then you said that this was very different for me, but so I think originally I just wanted this kind of like floating kind of theme motif. And so I had this perspective of this building as it was. And the building itself was, very much like a kind of a modern brick type of building. But when I started working with it, I had this idea that I think originally it was more bluish, and I wanted to have some warm colors, and I wanted to have a gradient feel. And I think when I started blending the colors with that image, it really changed it. So instead of it being like a very brick, dark building, it became, as you can see here, very kind of, white highlights and, geometric shapes. So it took on a kind of life of its own, which I liked. It was very kind of surprising. And it accentuated the red a bit more, which I liked, and let the blues kind of float away with the clouds. And so I added, the other astronaut type of image in the top right, but wanted it to give a feeling of it floating away. So I repeated that astronaut in the top middle, but I wanted to subdue it as if he's really floating away. So, playing with layer mask and layer blending modes and creating a color gradient to give it that overall color look.
What I love about this, Andrew, when you look, it's, how can I describe it? Your perspectives, because what you look at is what I call how you see the world, straight, flat on. But then as you look into it, it's like, oh no, I'm feeling like I'm looking up at the building, but then I'm also looking flat. And so it really shifts your perspective. Well, it does for me, my perspective, that I'm looking straight, then I'm looking up.
Right.
And it throws you around, which is good.
Right. And some of the textures almost look like you're looking down on them, but you're looking up.
Yes.
And I think that comes from, I think that when I was younger, either I bought or my mom bought me a book of M.C. Escher. And I really was fascinated by M.C. Escher's genius, I guess you could say, play on perspective, where he would have spirals where the spiral goes down, but then all of a sudden it looks like it's going up. And it's like, how is that possible? So he was just a genius in that way, just very fascinating with playing with those type of contrary perspectives. And then Hannah agrees with you. She says, I was surprised to see this one. It's so different. Still, there is your recognizable perspective.
Yes.
So yeah, I like to break away from my color theme or the general feel. And I mean, I'm aware that I use certain motifs over and over again too. And, I mean, I'm essentially making work for myself, but then sharing it, but I don't want to, bore my friends or followers. So,
yep.
I do become aware, like, am I using the ocean motif too many times, which you can even see in the background for the for the talk
Oh,
here.
now I've got to look now.
Yeah, one of my images. But so yeah, I mean, I try to break out when I can. The only thing is, I do keep going back to those images because I resonate with them. So
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah,
And I think that sometimes that's good. For me, I do sets of threes, Andrew. So those two first ones that are the two Ukrainian ones, I'll do another one, and I'll do it in the similar colours, and so that's how I build a series. And again,
sure.
what you were saying, it's for ourselves. There's no outcome, not selling it, not doing anything. It's just for ourselves.
I mean, if someone wants to buy it, I'm all for it. But
That's true. That's true.
I mean, yeah, I always, I do it for my vision, to express my vision, my feeling. And if people resonate with it, sure, it feels great. But yeah, I don't want to fall into a trap of, creating for other people or anything. So
No,
yeah.
I'm very much, for me, just having fun. And I think that sometimes people, you've still got to have that fun. You've got to enjoy what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Because if it becomes hard work, then it's not enjoyable. And that's just my perspective on being creative.
Well,
but I love it.
I think that's how I even got into doing this type of work more was, back in the 90s, I did, work in New York for advertising studios. And, when you work for advertising and you work for, some of the bigger companies, it's very demanding. And there's a lot of like work that's due yesterday. And, they drop work on you and it's always under the gun and things have to always be perfect and they keep getting reviewed again and again and again. So I think that's the whole beauty of creating for yourself is you can be more free and you still have a certain standard you want to go to, but you let your work have a playfulness that is very different from like the corporate world that I've worked in. So,
And I mean, for me, like I started as landscape photography. And now I'm doing what I call artwork. Still using my photos that have been sitting there, but it's creating art.
nice.
Whereas I was a straight landscaper, do the big vistas and that's fine. But I've evolved and changed.
But to give respect to our past, I would say, obviously, being landscape photographer, that's a lot of the focus of what you also implement in your work.
Yes.
And the same thing with me, like even before advertising, when I went to art college, I went as a printmaking major. So I see elements in my work that remind me of, lithographs or etchings and trying to play on the contrast or the texture of that. So,
And that's very true because for me, I don't know how you build up, but for me, I go for one photo. That's my background. It's generally a landscape or an urban. The Ukrainian ones are very much an urban. But I'll go for landscape and then I build a story within the landscape.
Nice.
And so it's the roots that you start with that start to come through, but in a different way.
Absolutely. And Dave says, if you like your image, that's all that matters. If someone else likes it, it's a bonus. And if someone offers you money for it, it's a hat trick.
Well put, Dave. I quite like that.
Starts off with you, then others, and then if they offer you money for it, it's a hat trick. Nice.
That's a nice little snapshot there of how it would be, or how it could be.
Okay, and then so then I worked on this one, and I think this one started off where there was just this very beautiful kind of at the bottom of the ocean kind of textured image I saw. And I think it might have been subdued in color, and I added back more of the kind of aqua and deeper blues, but I like the textures and, once again, the kind of meditation motif. I wanted to bring in this woman who's, meditating, or I guess could be sleeping or meditating, and incorporate it with the kind of, the textures, but also I added the kind of waves coming in to kind of represent like the kind of battle that you sometimes have with meditation, where it's, thoughts coming up and thoughts going away. And I am aware of my color themes, so I wanted to also add that sky, which I thought kind of worked well with it to kind of take you up from a certain level. So it's reversed, where the sky is at the bottom and then the water is at the top. And then Hannah asks, what do you use more in your works, your own photos or stock photos? So for me, when, pre-pandemic, I would go out and take a lot more kind of texture photos and photos of, one thing I enjoyed was taking photos of like mannequins and different displays, and even ones that were meant to be just, purely for, clothing or a product. I would still find like what seems surreal to me in the reflection, and I would take those photos. So I used to incorporate those type of photos and textures into my work more, but I've noticed in the pandemic, there hasn't been good displays in a lot of these stores, and some of the stores have been closed down temporarily. So I got more into stock, and so I started utilizing different stock imagery, and mainly from Pexels. So I'm a fan of Pexels.com, and so I pretty much have been using stock photos more during the pandemic, and I'm hoping that things clear up a bit more and I can go out and take more photos of different displays and textures and alleyways and, urban environments. I live in Los Angeles, so I'm looking for those type of motifs and environments as well. But I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I feel that as long as I, work with the stock image, I kind of make it part of like a painterly or digital art composition. I don't have an issue with that. I know some people might, some people are very strict and they say, I have to use my own photos. I don't really come from that state of mind. It's more like I have an image or a vision I want to get out there. And if I need elements from a stock site, I don't feel bad, quote unquote, bad about it. I just feel like I need them to get the idea expressed.
And I'm the same, Andrew. If I have a vision or a story and I don't have those elements, I use Pixel Squid, I'll use Adobe Freestock because I don't have an element. And some of my whimsical stuff, quirky houses, well, I'm not going to photograph them because they're not going to be out in the real world,
right?
That I can. But for me, it's the same. But I generally use my photos in the landscapes and the elements, but I have no problem in just going and finding an element because the vision's there. Do you find that, Andrew, that you've got that vision and you want that element and then you'll go, oh, well, I don't have it. Okay, so then I'll go and look for it.
Correct.
And do that. But that's a good question, Hannah.
Yeah, it's a good question. And then, the main thing is to get the idea out there, to get the feeling, the theme, the motif that I want to get out there. So, but I do respect, sites like Pexels and, Pixel Squid, like you said, where, you can get, royalty-free images to use. I'm not a fan of like just going to say Google and then grabbing anybody's image and then using it.
Unsplash, a couple of those, places have that. Andrew, what I love when I look at this image, firstly, the color. I just love the brilliance of the color, of the warmth. It's just, again, so yin yang, because you're putting what we know in a normal world, that sky's at the top and that's at the bottom. But when I look at this, it reminded me of a couple of things. It reminded me when I looked at the woman. What was that? And I know the photos, and I'm dreadful on the photographers' names or authors. The one that did that lady in, I think it was Afghanistan, the lady that was in the green veil. It was a well-known.
The intense stare.
Correct. Yep. It reminded me of that, but it also reminded me when I look at it now, and I go, oh, it feels like she's in the 30s, in the Depression years. Just, I don't know, that thought came in. And so that's what I love, is that you look at it and then you can relate with something, or you're looking and it just makes you think of things. So your use of your water as a texture at the top is just beautiful.
Thank you. And then the one thing that kind of evolved when I was working on it was, I had this general idea and I was putting it together and I was playing with the different color areas. But one thing that kind of came out of it, that evolved as I was working on it, was with those textures, there was that area where it almost looks like a knot in a torso area. and then, kind of dissipates. And then there's her, that face of kind of transcendence or, deep meditation. So that was just a textures that was part of the underlying original image. But I liked when I added the sky, it accentuated that more. And I liked the fact that that became its own metaphor. So it was almost like it could be a metaphor of being lost in a knot of thoughts, and then she frees herself from it. So, and then
Thanks, Dave. You're full of. I'm having brain blocks. I know. Yep. Stephen Curry's, Afghan. Yep.
And that's interesting that the way that different people perceive things, because for this it's very much these forces of nature playing with each other in the meditative state or look, and then for you it evoked Steve McCurry's Afghan Girl, where that was the farthest thing from my mind.
Yes.
But you saw it in it, and that's what's interesting about the way that we interact, and other people perceive things in something. So
I think because she's such a strong character in your artwork here, and I just then went to the memory bank, and that photo of that lady just was so dominant, and such a strength, and that's what I get from her as well.
Great, thanks. Let's see, and then last series. So, and this is also an image I did recently, where I did a second version where I changed the color a bit. But and this was more, it's kind of taking from a bit of the same feeling as the previous one, but yet this one was more like, with the hand gesture and the textures around there, and then the blending of the ocean with her face. This was more like almost like for me, a goddess that was almost watching her creation, or watching the world spin. There was that kind of feeling for me with this one. And then I think I worked on it, and I played with the colors and the color grading, and then I believe I posted it to the social networks, and then almost immediately I was like, should I have left that? I like it in the top left, but should I have left that kind of magenta, the purplish in the ocean? And I was almost thinking maybe it should have been more, aqua or blue throughout that part, which then inspired me to just create a different kind of a bluer version of this whole image. But it doesn't really bother me when I look at it now. I kind of like the fact that your eye goes in and out with color. Yeah. And the kind
I think that's what it is. That depth of color. Just looking around.
Using color to kind of make your eye navigate around the image, so not just express mood, but to kind of navigate your eye. So
and it does, you can see the shifts of magenta all through the image, over on the right hand side. So it ties what I call tonally, or color. You shift your eye, and you can see that same color coming through. And that's a good technique, Andrew, that some people may not realize that color, that changing of colors can shift the eye. It doesn't have to be a strong element.
Yeah, cool. Any comments or questions from the attendees?
We'd like to have a couple of comments come up, or questions, or how do you feel working with color? But I think
silence.
What it is. Oh, what have we got?
No, I was saying silence. Silence.
It is. I thought, we have a question.
No.
Because no, Andrew, and we keep saying it is that we don't get a chance as creatives to talk about what we do. It tends to be like the technical, I did this layer. But the layers is the technique. The story and the imagination comes from us, and the different techniques that we use. And I don't think we talk much about that right brain side of, what we were feeling, what was it that I wanted to show, what's my style. I don't think we do that enough as creators.
So sorry, I was distracted as I was watching your last photo on a big screen. Oh, that's nice. I'd like to see that on the. like a friend's or client's big screen to see my works.
Yep.
Must be
Yep.
nice if you have work and then someone puts it like on a big wall in a gallery or on a billboard or something, that must be very satisfying.
Oh, yeah, that's when you go, yep,
She says it's a big
that's
difference.
mine. That's mine.
Yeah, as
Hanging
long
on
as,
the
my only concern is like typically if you put something on a billboard though, you give it lower resolution because people are looking at it from a distance.
Yep.
So instead of like 300 PPI for print, you might bring it down to 150 or 100. And I'm just concerned that you would miss out on the details of, the areas that have a lot of detail. But maybe a TV or on a big screen, big monitor, big TV, it might be nice to bring out some of those details.
And I think that's too, like today's world, we're looking at a lot of images on the phone, and it really compresses it, and that's when you see it on a big monitor. That's when your eye really shifts around. But they say that most people will look at the images on different platforms, and they'll see it on their phone as opposed to a screen or a bigger monitor.
Yeah, that's one thing that's interesting about creating is how certain images, I really wish that people see it on their desktop computer and will click and see it larger. And then other images, I kind of do prefer or like the look of them on the mobile.
Yep,
So,
very much. And that's so. I mean, Dave gets the gold star, Andrew, because he's given me. I can sleep at night knowing Eastern European and Steve McCurry's. I can now, he's come in with some really good gems that I was stuck on. Probably, Andrew, just a quick question out to our viewers is, if you described yourself as a creative, what would you say that you are? Is it organic? Do you plan? Is it color? What is it that resonates with you? Because Andrew and I were talking, weren't we, Andrew, about we have totally different styles and yet similarities.
I mean, for me, it's more like starts with kind of how do I say this, kind of an idea of a feeling. So there's a feeling that I want to kind of get out there. And a lot of times it is influenced by music I listen to. And so there'll be a feeling I want to express, and then I'll put the elements together. And then, like I said, in the past, there's times when it takes me on a new direction and I might even create a totally different piece. Yeah, my work, people have said before, and I love that, is like surrealism. I think of my work as kind of like surrealistic dream imagery. And that's what I enjoy. And like I said, for me, it's kind of a breakaway from the work I did in the industry, which was very professional, very stiff, and demanding at times. Perfection. So it's a breakaway from perfection, even though I have my own criteria of where I want an image, to be. I don't want it to, like, if I cut elements out, I don't want them to be sloppy or anything. But it's creativity for me is to break free from a lot of those kind of constraints of using Photoshop in a corporate world, I guess.
Yep.
And then Hannah says, I'm following the story idea in my head and I never where I'm going to finish. Yeah, I enjoy that too, where you start off with a certain kind of story or idea, and then you add elements, and then it might take you totally in a different direction and you have no idea where you might finish. But I do like the fact that when I'm working, I'm pretty clear about when I think it's finished, though. Like I don't know where I'm going to finish it, but I like the feeling of knowing that it's done. And then Dave says, Eastern European rooms always seem to have older basic furniture, unlike the Western Europeans who have the latest TV, pictures on the wall, modern decor, and are brighter and more colorful. Yep, good explanation of Eastern Europe. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm very much the same. If you look at those two images, I was drawing on my feelings. I had the photo, but it was like then the feelings of what would it be like, and you just don't know where the story's going to go. Sometimes I have a story in my mind, and other times it's just let's start with one photo and let's see where it takes me. And I think that's, you've got that expression inside of you. And we were talking about it before, Andrew, that it's something that's building up in you and you just have to create and you have to get it out of you. And then it's like, yep, that's good. I've had my food for the day. I can then move on. But it's just
creative
this build
food.
up.
I've had your creative food. So
I've had the creative food and it builds up and it's saying, let me out. And then I'm done. And then it's like, good, I'll go and then work in it. So, but there's been some good comments, with observations and,
thank you, Dave and Hannah. So.
Yeah, thank you for coming in. And for anyone else that's watching, later on, post any comments up. It's really good to hear what you guys are thinking, I think.
Yeah. And as usual, I will share these to the different groups. And please do watch on my YouTube channel. So let me remind everyone about that. So first is when we go to here, we were talking about the textures. So do remember that Sandra has a good series, a wonderful series of textures, fine art textures. There's a textures bundle, scratch textures, neutral textures, skies. That's right, sky textures. Light and breezy textures and urban textures, so many different kinds. And so do remember that if you use the code Andrew30, you can get 30% off these wonderful textures from Sandra D Imagery. And that is at sandradimagery.com/Sandra D Imagery textures with digital art. And if you don't see that, like in the recordings or anything, please reach out to me or Sandra, send us a message and we will send you that link. So quite generous, 30% off. So
yep, all made with love, Andrew, all made with love.
That's right. The best ingredient.
Yes, like a coffee.
Hannah says thank you. And then just to let people know as well, that you can find Sandra at sandradimagery.com. Also on Instagram, instagram.com/SandraDimagery. And then for me, you can find me at YouTube. So subscribe for my digital art presentations, these kind of Photoshop and photography and digital art focused live streams and tutorials. Go to YouTube, just search for Digital Art Drew or type that in the URL. And then I'm also on Behance. So behance.net, Drew Cav. And then for those who might be watching this live or have recently joined, please make sure to tell your friends to come join the digital art group. So facebook.com/groups, the digital art group. I think it's about 1,650 members, somewhat new, but do a search for the digital art group.
It's beautiful work that's shared on there too, Andrew, and that's what I love about the Facebook group.
Yeah, it's a great platform to see all the different styles. So once again, thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you, and have a great evening, morning, wherever you are in the world.
And please feel free to share this if you see it. Maybe grab the description and the link and share it on your timeline, wherever you want. Feel free to share it. And keep your eye out for next week's on Wednesday. I think we have a special guest talking about a certain special app next Wednesday. Ooh. And we are always open to also having guests. So if you, have some great digital art that you want to show the world, let us know and we'll schedule you in. So thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful
everybody.
morning, afternoon, or evening.